So next to severe weather in the Midwest, the next thing that I think is so very interesting is severe weather in something we call generically tropical cyclones, or in our neck of the woods we call them hurricanes. So of course here in the Midwest we don't get to enjoy hurricanes per se. We do sometimes get touched by this large volume of water of a hurricane after it's finally come ashore in what we call the spiral rain bands, but they are very interesting. Actually, side by side, these are two, aren't these kind of interesting? This must be Boris and meet Christina. And as you probably already know, one of the things I think is interesting is we actually name hurricanes, and we name them alphabetical. And generally they come from, they take these easterly waves that are near the intertropical convergence zone, and they travel from east to west. And so that's why I knew that this is Boris and this is Christina. They look nasty, don't they? But actually these were not upgraded to a hurricane. We're going to see that there are stages of building up to what we call a hurricane. And one of the stages right before hurricane is what we call a tropical storm. And they got to that stage, but didn't get the winds or the central low pressure to go ahead and be upgraded to a hurricane. So these are storms Boris and Christina. Notice that the whole naming thing is so interesting too, I think, and I have a slide on that. But we name them alternating now. Boys' name's Boris and girls' name is Christina. All right, so tropical cyclones. Those were tropical storms. So tropical cyclone, the generic term is tropical cyclone. In order for it to be a tropical cyclone, by the way, the non-generic term for a tropical cyclone in our neck of the woods is a hurricane. So these can be used interchangeably. But I mentioned that the tropical storm needs to generate winds at least 74 miles per hour or greater, and then it can go from a tropical storm to a hurricane or tropical cyclone. Another way to gauge the intensity of a tropical cyclone, or I should say a tropical storm, is what is that low pressure in the eye. So if it's 980 millibars or less, then you're going to have it upgraded to a tropical cyclone. So if you're in a different part of the world, you call tropical cyclones typhoons. And I have a map here in a minute to kind of show you what is meant by the Western Pacific. Okay, if you're in a different neck of the woods, you call tropical cyclones simply cyclones. And there's kind of two regions near Australia that use that convention. But when you see this world map here in a minute, try to kind of check out these ocean basins, and you can see in general where these tropical cyclones form relative to large ocean basins, and it's in general on the western edge of an ocean basin in general. So here is the world map, and these dots represent a certain kind of constant number of tropical cyclones. So of course, I got a little bit of sound here, we call tropical cyclones hurricanes in our neck of the woods. And actually we have two broad groups of hurricanes, as you might know. These are our probably most obvious hurricanes, and I think most tense, most notorious hurricanes. And they form in the Atlantic Ocean basin. But there are hurricanes that form here kind of in the Gulf and move their way, or form here in Pacific. Where's my little marker? There it is. And we call those hurricanes as well. And you can kind of see that they form different times, like the latter, the hurricanes in the Pacific Ocean, maybe even the Gulf, June through October. The more common ones in the Atlantic Ocean basin, August through October. So moving over here, then these folks, I don't know if you kind of orient yourself, but this would be Japan, I think. Does that seem right? Okay. They call them, in this neck of the woods, they call tropical cyclones typhoons. And then last but, excuse me, not least, we kind of have three regions of the world that call them well, not three regions of the world, but three kind of sources where they call tropical cyclones cyclones. and these would be the ones near India, and then the two sides on either side of Australia. So Australia has some cyclones that form here in the Indian Ocean, and they also have some cyclones over here in the Pacific. But can you kind of see where most of the hurricanes form on the western edge of these large ocean basins? And as we talk about tropical cyclones, we call them hurricanes, remember, we're going to see that they travel along easterly trade winds. So that's kind of how they end up kind of intensifying until they get over to the western edge of an ocean basin. So up to 2008, these are the deadliest hurricanes from 1900 to 2008. So of course, the fact that we're using the word hurricanes means that we're isolating it just to kind of North America. So the first two, actually, the first one was and I have pictures of the Galveston hurricane. Now, the Galveston hurricane in 1900, this is before we gave them male and female names. The number of deaths were 8,000 approximately. Then in 1928, there was a hurricane near Lake Okoboji in Florida, and it took upwards to 3,000 lives. Then I'm going to skip number 3 and go to number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now just kind of focus on the dates here. 1957 for Hurricane Audrey, and then actually these other ones down here, 1935, 1926, 1909, these are years that they occurred. These don't actually have specific names. They're just named after the region where they occurred, and you can see the associated deaths. Honestly, I would think, and I must have read this somewhere, that hurricanes that happened a long time ago, basically our system of being able to predict the hurricanes and notify the people was a lot different than it is now. So I left number 3 out momentarily because the third from 1900 to 2008 deadliest hurricane was Hurricane Katrina. Now they've got a number of deaths here indicated of 1,833, but I would say that's probably low. So that was in 2005. Now one of the things you might know about hurricane names, of course Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Audrey are both kind of the current way that we name hurricanes. Once we have such a famous hurricane that takes, well, famous probably for taking lives, that name is retired. So no longer will there ever be a name Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Audrey. This section right here I kind of left too. If you're familiar with how we kind of classify hurricanes, we categorize them as Category 1 to Category 5. And Category 5 is the most intense hurricane. But I just thought I would kind of show you that, you know, Category 4 hurricane is what's taken all these lives. So this is from the Galveston hurricane. Notice there was a Galveston hurricane in 1900 and one in 1925. It got hit twice. One of the reasons that we've had so much damage to structure and loss of lives with hurricanes is because, of course, hurricanes hit the coast, and coasts are oftentimes where people will go ahead and settle. So that was 1900. This is Hurricane Ike in 2008 and the devastation after Hurricane Ike went through. Where when we talk about like what damage a hurricane brings, it's going to be many things. It's going to be something we call storm surge. It's going to be flooding from the spiral rain bands. It's going to be wind that's kind of blowing around that central low pressure. And I think I might have mentioned earlier that it's also going to be tornadoes embedded in those spiral arms.